Hi, it's Jillian from Loveleigh Loops, and I wanted to talk through some different types of lettering styles that you can create. So if you follow us on Instagram at Loveleigh Loops, or you look for the hashtag Loveleigh Styles, you'll see tons of examples of different words that we've created, and all of them are shown in these 6 styles. So let's talk through them. The very first one is just a very basic style, and I'm going to just draw a quick baseline here. So just draw a straight line, and what we can see for this basic style is that all of our letters besides this part of the M are resting on a single baseline. And the thing about actually every style on this page is that your downstrokes are going to be thicker than your upstrokes. So that's a classic calligraphy look. So in this basic style, anywhere that the letter goes up or the stroke goes up, it's going to be thin. And when it comes back down, it's going to be thick. So if you're using an Apple pencil with a brush that has pressure sensitivity, when you go up, you're going to want to press lighter, and then as you come down, you can press harder. Same thing with a brush pen or pointed pen, press harder on the downstroke. So that's a very basic part of calligraphy. Then the other part of this basic style is the letter forms. So we're going to use very basic letter forms like this O. All it is an oval, and then we connect it to the next letter. Same thing with like our L, it's just a very basic kind of L. Also, the space in between all of the letters is just fairly standard. The letters don't look too close together, too far apart or anything, and they're all on the same baseline. So now when we look at style number 2, which is Bouncy, let's just draw in a baseline here. So I'm just going to draw a straight line, and let's move it up just a tiny bit. Okay, so you can see here that on the Bouncy style, there are areas of the letter that go below the baseline. So anything below this line, like the part of the M, R, L, and T, these are considered bouncy letters because they're bouncing below the baseline. There's actually a couple spots like this part of the M goes above our X height, so we can bounce below the baseline but also above, like right this part of the M. So this part of the R would normally come a little bit above the X height. It would look something like this, just like we have in the basic style, but this one is very exaggerated. So in the Bouncy style, basically what we're doing is we're exaggerating curves. We even have a little bit of a curvy crossbar on the T right here, whereas normally in the basic style it would be straight. So those are some things you can look for. Also, same thing with this O. So this O, instead of just having a very simple basic oval, we have a nice curvy kind of O that connects right into the T. So those are some characteristics of the Bouncy style. The third one is called expanded. So here what we're looking at is the space in between the letters. So in between the letter, there's a lot more space here than there is in these examples. It's almost like you could fit another letter in between each one of these. Like you could probably fit another E in between every single one. And here we would have about the same amount of space as the other examples. So you're expanding the amount of space between the letters about 2 times the normal width. Another thing that I like to do, in addition to expanding the space between the letters, is the way that I enter and end the word. So you can see this sort of dramatic long entrance swoosh right here, or swash. And same thing with the T. Instead of just ending it in the basic style like how we have it here, we are going to extend it out and to the right like that. Other than that, the letter forms here are fairly standard or fairly basic, pretty similar to what we had at the top. And you can really use any kind of letter form here. Like you can see the O is similar to the Bouncy O, and the E is just pretty standard. So for the expanded version, we're just mainly looking at the amount of space in between the letters. And in this example, all of these do sit on the same baseline. But you could definitely do more of a bouncy look and kind of combine these two. So anyway, that was our expanded style. Now let's look at the formal style. So in a formal style of calligraphy, this is based on copperplate style calligraphy. There are specific rules to follow. You can see in this example, the letters are a lot more slanted. So if we just take a look at this L. I'm just going to trace the straight part of the L. You can see that the spine of the L is really leaning over compared to like a straight up and down line like this. So in a formal style, we have a much more deep slant here versus some of the other styles. Like if I trace this main part of the T, then that is fairly upright compared to this style. So just to compare those side by side, if I trace that part of the T again, and then move that line over this angle, you can see the difference. The formal one is much more leaning over. The other thing you'll notice is that we use more traditional letter forms. So for example, for this M, it's very formal looking. We have the points at the top and the bottom. It's tilted over compared to this one up here, which kind of just looks like a lowercase m, but a bigger version for the basic one. And the R is pretty different too. So a basic R looks something like this, entrance stroke, and finishing off like that. But you can see a huge difference with this style where we still have the thin up and the thick down, but this one just looks a lot more formal. So in this example, this loop kind of got closed off, but either way is fine. Also, you'll notice that the strokes are a little bit thinner here, and this is kind of a stylistic choice, but the thickness, for example, of this part of the O is pretty thick, like if you were to draw over that, versus here, the thickness is a little bit thinner. It's like probably maybe half the thickness of these. And then the letters in general are just a little bit more elegant looking, not quite as chunky as the versions up here. The letters are also fairly narrow, like the amount of space that this E takes up is pretty small compared to this E is a little bit wider. So for this capitals version, these are just how I write the capital letters when I have them, when I'm writing an all caps style. So we still want to use the same principle of thin upstroke and thick downstroke. The M is actually a tricky one. A lot of people want to make the first downstroke thick, and then they get to this part and realize that it looks kind of weird if you just make it like that. So anyway, the thing to remember with the M is not to start with that stem first, but to actually go up, down, so that you're getting the thicks in the correct spot. Another thing that I do with my capitals is if this is the top of my capital letter and this is the bottom, instead of making my crossbars right in the middle, I like to make them a little bit lower. So this word only has the E and the R that would follow that. But you can tell that these just connect a little bit lower. There's not equal space here and here. It's bigger at the top. Okay, and then I have a fairly standard amount of space in between my letters. It's not a huge amount of space, but they're not really tight, but that's definitely something that you can play around with as well. Okay, and then finally for this flourished version, it's beautiful. So we're kind of taking the formal version or just like a standard type of letters and then adding on some flourishes. So anywhere, so this part of the L is a flourish, this part of the M, anything that sort of extends the letter beyond where it normally lives would be considered a flourish. And this beautiful part of the R is definitely a flourish. So there's lots to consider when it comes to adding flourishes, like the overall balance of the piece and how these loops interact with each other and the size of the loops. So typically there's lots of rules that you can follow for flourishing, but a couple of them include making sure that your loops are rather oval shaped rather than too circular, unless you like a more circular style. And then also pay attention to how they intersect with one another. So in this example here, you can see we have approximately 90-degree angle. Like if you just look right where they connect, it almost looks like a plus sign. So that was an overview of each of these styles. Now if we just look at another example here, you can see those exact same principles in play. So for the basic one, we just have thick downstrokes, thin upstrokes, and there's a contrast. We have a standard amount of space between the letters. They're not too far apart. For Bouncy, if we just draw in a baseline here, you can see that there are parts of the letter that go below it, like this part of the N, D, L, and then some curves at the top that are a little bit exaggerated as well, like the first part of the N. Then the expanded version, we've increased the amount of space in between the letters compared to the basic version. Formal, a great letter to look at for this one would be the F. You can see in the more basic version, it has a loop on the top and the bottom, but for this one we have a very elegant loop on top. The ascender is actually taller in proportion compared to the basic version, and then we also have a nice elegant looking stroke, like the strokes aren't too thick and chunky like they are in the basic version. They're nice and thin, and the letters are also a little bit narrower and more slanted. For the capitals, I like to cross mine a little bit lower than halfway, so you can see that consistency here. And then finally, the flourishing, we can see some of those things we talked about before. This one's a little bit different from the Merlot example. We have the word has fewer flourishes. It's not completely surrounded by flourishes like we had in this example, but we still maintain some balance by the placement of these flourishes. So now you know some of the differences between these styles, and hopefully you can take these tips and apply them to your own lettering so that you can try them out yourself. If you do try these styles, feel free to tag us on Instagram with hashtag #LoveleighyStyles or #LoveleighyLoops, and we would love to see your work. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to our channel if you want more videos just like this.